Let's investigate a mystery: two Italians, a motorcycle engine built from scrap, and a strategic wartime secret the Nazis desperately wanted to steal, but couldn't. Our investigation reveals how a vehicle engineered simply to haul potatoes and eggs through muddy French fields ultimately became Europe's ultimate best-selling car, humiliating corporate giants like Volkswagen and Fiat. From a strategic perspective, this machine should never have existed. World War II condemned it to death before its launch, yet certain actors disobeyed executive orders. They hid early prototypes in an attic, working clandestinely, right under the noses of occupying German forces, to build an engine that still runs today. This is the strategic history of the Citroën 2CV, and we are about to uncover its secrets. Our historical records point back to a rainy afternoon in the mid-1930s on a muddy country road in rural France. Pierre-Jules Boulanger, the newly appointed head of Citroën, found himself stuck behind a slow, horse-drawn carriage. A typical executive would have honked in frustration and forgotten the delay by dinner. But Boulanger possessed a rare analytical mind. Observing the peasant driving that rickety wooden cart, he formulated a disruptive question that would reshape global industrial strategy. Why do millions of working families still rely on horses instead of driving cars? The economic reality was both simple and brutal. No automobile on the market was cheap enough to be accessible to rural farmers or local working-class citizens. Historically, Boulanger took control of Citroën under extreme financial duress. In 1934, André Citroën, the visionary who once lit up the Eiffel Tower with his name, went bankrupt. Michelin, the primary creditor, seized strategic control of the firm, and Citroën himself passed away the following year. Boulanger inherited a failing enterprise with only one successful mass-market model, the revolutionary traction Avant, and a desperate need to capture a new market. That rainy afternoon behind the cart showed him exactly where to look. In 1936, Boulanger executed an unprecedented strategic move. He commissioned a massive nationwide market research study. The data was a revelation. When asked if they owned a vehicle, the vast majority answered no. They were farmers and small merchants, all dreaming of cheap, robust mechanical transport, designed to replace horse carts. Boulanger leveraged this data to write design specifications that sound absurd today, yet ultimately revolutionized the global automotive industry. His original strategic brief stated, "Design a vehicle capable of carrying two farmers wearing clogs and hats, plus 50 kilograms of potatoes, or a wine barrel, at 60 kilometers per hour, while consuming 3 liters per 100 kilometers. And crucially, the car had to cross a freshly plowed field with a basket of eggs on the seat without breaking a single one." Skeptics thought Boulanger had lost his mind, but the director had a strategic mantra he constantly repeated to his engineers: be ruthlessly cheap. Every screw, every bolt, every inch of sheet metal had to justify its existence. If a part was not absolutely critical, it was cut. The secret program was codenamed TPV, meaning very small car. To head the engineering team, Boulanger selected André Lefebvre, a brilliant aeronautical engineer who brought aviation design principles to automotive development. Security was absolute. The Michelin family purchased a remote estate enclosed by a 3-meter wall at La Ferté-Vidame, constructing a secret test facility restricted strictly to their core team members. Boulanger was highly protective of their intellectual property, and with good reason. Across the Rhine, Ferdinand Porsche was designing a rival vehicle under direct orders from Adolf Hitler, a massive industrial project known today as the Volkswagen Beetle. By 1939, after 3 years of intense engineering, 250 distinct TPV prototypes lined the secret test track. Boulanger evaluated each design himself using a brilliant quality control metric. He arrived wearing a traditional straw hat, identical to those worn by French farmers, and insisted on entering every vehicle without knocking it off his head. If his hat fell, the design failed. Uncomfortable seats, rejected. Trunk too small for a potato sack, scrapped immediately. This brutal selection process eliminated almost everything, sparing only 15 viable test cars. Success seemed close. Citroën prepared for a major launch at the 1940 Paris Motor Show, with marketing campaigns already finalized. The branding was finalized, and industry disruption was imminent. But on September 1st, 1939, Adolf Hitler ordered the invasion of Poland, forcing France and Great Britain into the war. The Parisian Auto Show was cancelled immediately, leaving Boulanger with an incredibly difficult strategic decision. With German occupation imminent, these advanced designs could not fall into enemy hands, especially since this lightweight, agile platform could easily be weaponized for military utility. The command was clear: destroy the entire fleet. But Citroën's engineers staged a quiet industrial rebellion. Instead of executing the complete fleet, they destroyed only the discarded models, secretly preserving 10 elite prototypes for the future. 3 vehicles were smuggled into an attic at the test facility and bricked behind a wall, remaining entirely undetected until roofers discovered them in the late 90s, perfectly intact after 50 years. However, other prototypes were destined for a different fate. A far more complex and perilous fate unfolded as they fell directly into Wehrmacht hands. German soldiers loaded the secret prototypes onto a train bound for Wolfsburg, where Ferdinand Porsche and his team were actively developing the Beetle. Porsche's engineers dissected the TPV prototypes with curiosity testing and dismantling them, only to dismiss their ultra-lightweight design as tactically useless for military operations. The military career of the future 2CV died before starting, and those prototypes vanished into the chaos of war. While the TPV prototypes lay hidden in dusty attics and clandestine labs, occupied, Paris suffered under brutal German control. At Citroën's Quai de Javel plant, the Germans permitted only military truck production, strictly outlawing any strategic research or development of new civilian vehicles. Yet Boulanger was not one to yield. Beneath the surface of that seemingly compliant factory, a select team of engineers secretly developed the blueprint destined to reshape the industry. And what you and I find most astonishing about this covert operation is that its 2 key masterminds were not French, but actually Italian. The first strategist was Flaminio Bertoni, born in Masnago in 1903. A carpenter's son, he had dreamed since youth of becoming a sculptor, but fate diverted him toward an equally remarkable path. At 15, he apprenticed at the Maki coach-building workshop. There he realized shaping automotive sheet metal required the exact same precision as sculpting marble or plaster. At 25, he crossed the Alps, arriving in Paris to join Citroën. There his spatial genius erupted far beyond anyone's expectations, because it was Bertoni himself who designed the iconic 1934 Traction Avant. This vehicle revolutionized mass production by placing the engine up front to pull the wheels rather than push them from behind. Yet when the TPV project launched in the late 30s, Bertoni was strategically sidelined. Management never consulted him or requested his input, a dismissal that deeply wounded his artistic pride. Armed only with modeling clay, he locked himself in his private studio, hand sculpting a completely alternative aerodynamic body for the struggling TPV design. Presenting it to Boulanger, the director general was stunned. Bertoni's model was strategically and aesthetically superior to anything the official team had delivered. His fluid, organic curves transformed a crude agricultural utility vehicle into a sleek, revolutionary machine, a design radiating genuine charisma, warmth, and soul. Boulanger instantly recognized his genius and recruited him on the spot. The second Italian asset was Walter Becchia, born in Piedmont in 1896. But as we dig deeper, his story becomes even more incredible. An ardent anti-fascist, Becchia fled Mussolini's regime, abandoning a stellar engineering career at Fiat, where he had previously worked on the legendary 804 Grand Prix racing engine. Immigrating to France, he joined Talbot Lago, carving out a reputation for designing highly sophisticated, high-performance engines. In 1941, Citroën recruited him for a critical objective, completely redesigning the future 2CV power plant. Yet his operational realities were brutal. As an Italian national in German-occupied Paris, Becchia faced constant surveillance and severe security restrictions. Banned from the Citroen labs after 6 p.m., his R&D hours were strictly constrained. Yet, analyzing his career, we see a man who utterly refused to capitulate. Locked out, he would literally stand outside the facility, pressing his ear against the exterior brick wall of the testing bay, where his prototype engines underwent grueling continuous endurance trials on the diagnostic dynamometer benches. Picture the scene. A brilliant Italian engineer huddled in the dark, diagnosing his own engine's mechanical performance solely by listening to its combustion vibrations through a thick concrete wall. This is not folklore. It is documented history. The tactical breakthrough in his research emerged from a minor accident. Flaminio Bertoni owned a BMW R12 motorcycle which he crashed heavily in 1940. Though the bike was ruined, Becchia requested the wreckage. What he discovered inside that scrap metal provided the strategic breakthrough he needed, as the BMW power plant was an air-cooled flat twin boxer, the exact layout that Lefebvre had demanded for the future too. C.V. Becchia dismantled every component of that wreckage, meticulously analyzing its engineering flaws and strengths. Then, performing a masterclass in strategic reverse engineering, he used those lessons to design a completely new propulsion system from absolute scratch. The result was a 375 cubic centimeter air-cooled boxer twin, generating 9 horsepower and utilizing a highly simplified ignition system that relied on a single, double-ended coil for both cylinders. A masterful engineering solution born, literally, from the scrap of a ruined motorcycle. But his genius did not stop there. Tasked with a standard 3-speed gearbox, Becchia pushed the boundaries. He engineered a 4-speed unit within the same casing, convincing Boulanger that the extra gear was merely an overdrive ratio, a fuel-saving mechanism. In reality, it was a brilliant tactical maneuver. He knew perfectly well that this 4th gear would compensate for the weight penalty of switching from aluminum alloys to a heavier steel body. It was an exceptionally shrewd strategic maneuver, especially considering that contemporary European economy cars, from the Renault Juva to the Peugeot 202, still relied on 3-speed boxes. But when Paris was liberated in August 1944, we encounter a bitter, paradoxical twist. French authorities arrested Bertoni for one simple reason. He was an Italian citizen, and Italy had been an enemy state. It mattered little that he had spent years serving French industry, or that his design genius had shaped the nation's most innovative cars. Ultimately, Citroen's leadership had to intervene personally to secure his release. Meanwhile, Becchia, despite his clear anti-fascist stance, found himself under tight surveillance. These two Italians had risked everything for a French car's future, yet they were treated like hostile enemies at the hour of victory. In 1945, amid Europe's smoking ruins, Boulanger inspected the surviving TPV prototype and uttered a critique that redefined the project. "This is an ugly duckling," and he was right. The vehicle selected 5 years earlier at Furtevittem was purely functional, looking more like agricultural equipment than an automobile. The 1939 aesthetics were now obsolete. They strategically required a master designer capable of turning this ugliness into something iconic. That master was Flaminio Bertoni, newly liberated from detention and immediately reinstated at the Citroën design department. Rejecting draftsmen's rulers and compasses, Bertoni worked like a sculptor, burying his hands in clay and plaster to model prototypes in 3 dimensions, with an astonishing speed that stunned his peers. Within days, he sculpted the definitive silhouette of the future 2CV, crafting those friendly, rounded contours that would make this vehicle instantly recognizable across the globe. Yet the front hood became a strategic bottleneck, defying his efforts for several weeks. In 1946, he made an unconventional move. He ordered his assistant, Henry Dargin, to join him at the Paris Motor Show, not to find inspiration, but to study what mistakes to avoid. Returning to the studio, he finalized the hood in 30 minutes. He utilized corrugated sheet metal, a brilliant structural solution that reduced weight while securing vital torsional rigidity. The ugly duckling had finally evolved. Concurrently, engineer Becchia finalized the powertrain. the famous air-cooled twin boxer that survived grueling 500-hour endurance testing. Yet Boulanger insisted on an aggressive cost-cutting detail that sounds absurd today, but was strategically vital then. The car would lack an electric starter to prevent failures and slash manufacturing costs. Instead, drivers would use a starting crank, the very same tool designed for wheel changes. Dual utility, zero extra cost. Be ruthlessly economical. On October 7, 1948, Citroën directors orchestrated one of the most calculated public relations stunts in automotive history. Just a day prior, the Director General deliberately assured the press that their stand held no major reveals. It was a complete fabrication. When they finally unveiled the 2CV to the public, the room fell dead silent for several seconds, followed by a backlash nobody in management had anticipated. Critics savaged the design, labeling it a ridiculous, ugly tin can, a mere umbrella on four wheels. One reporter famously compared it to a sardine can on wheels. Yet one strategic detail drove the automotive press mad. The hood was sealed shut, hiding the engine entirely. Buyers eager to order this bizarre vehicle faced a waiting period of over 12 months without even knowing what lay beneath that corrugated metal. Was this self-sabotage or a masterclass in modern marketing decades ahead of its time? But do you know who wasn't laughing? The working class public. Ordinary citizens still bearing the physical and economic scars of the war immediately recognized this strange vehicle as exactly what they needed. Dealerships were instantly overwhelmed, pushing waiting lists to an unprecedented 6 years. 6 years for an economy car the media had dismissed as a joke. So who got it right? The historical record speaks for itself. In 1949, the factory produced a mere 917 units, restricted by severe post-war steel shortages. Yet market demand was so overwhelming that every single vehicle was pre-sold long before exiting the assembly line. When consumers finally took the wheel, they discovered the vehicle outperformed all expectations. This microcar consumed just 3 to 4 liters per 100 kilometers, making every competitor look like an insatiable fuel guzzler. The competing Volkswagen Beetle cost more than double, even the Fiat 500. Italy's beloved Topolino cost twice as much. Crucially, neither of those competitors could offer a standard 4-speed transmission, a luxury mechanical feature typically reserved for high-end premium automobiles at the time. But as we analyze its design, the real triumph was ride comfort, its radical long-travel suspension. Engineered specifically to cross plowed fields without breaking a basket of eggs, delivered an incredibly smooth ride on rough terrain. Granted, the car suffered extreme body roll, but a low center of gravity ensured by the Boxer engine made rollovers mathematically impossible. Drivers could comfortably cruise at 60 kilometers per hour over unpaved roads as if they were gliding on a cloud. This raw utility was exactly what post-war French farmers and soon global consumers were demanding. And speaking of international markets, the 2CV quickly crossed the Alps into Italy, finding a highly receptive customer base. It severely undercut the local Fiat 500, offered unmatched fuel economy, and could be repaired with basic tools. In Lombardy, these highly efficient French imports with an Italian heart. For we must remember, their mechanical design was pioneered by 2 brilliant Italian exiles. They were even adopted by volunteer fire brigades and rural medical services, proving their utility in the deepest corners of the provinces. A red-painted 2CV bearing the Lombardy crest was a common sight across northern Italian roads throughout the 50s and 60s. On November 12, 1950, on the road from Clermont-Ferrand to Paris, Pierre-Jules Boulanger's car veered off course and hit a tree. The visionary who first imagined this minimalist car behind a horse-drawn cart inspecting prototypes in his signature straw hat died instantly at age 65. As historians, you and I must appreciate the dark irony that the creator of France's safest car perished in a crash. a man who had spent his entire career obsessing over every minor technical detail of his vehicles. Yet his creation was already strong enough to survive him embarking on a trajectory over the coming decades that defied all strategic forecasts. The 2CV evolved slowly but steadily. In 1955, the engine grew from 375 to 425 cubic centimeters, pushing horsepower to 18. Top speed climbed from 60 to over 80 kilometers per hour, and this vehicle, built for rural dirt roads, began conquering European urban traffic. But the real strategic pivot came in 1970, with a 602cc engine delivering 28 horsepower, pushing the small sedan to 113 kilometers per hour. When we analyze this, the engine power tripled, yet the car remained stubbornly faithful to its original design philosophy of absolute simplicity and thrift. Very few machines in industrial history have evolved so drastically while maintaining their core identity intact. Meanwhile, Citroën executives realized that the basic chassis was a strategic goldmine ripe for endless diversification. They launched the commercial van, the Diane, the Ami, and the legendary Mahari, a lightweight plastic utility vehicle that became the ultimate symbol of summer leisure on the Riviera. But the most radical engineering variant, which still stuns collectors today, was the 1958 Sahara. Citroën designers proposed a bizarre solution, mounting two independent engines in a single chassis, one driving the front wheels, the other driving the rear, engineering a highly unconventional four-wheel drive system without a heavy drive shaft or central differential. This setup created a machine capable of conquering deep desert sands with the same ease the standard model displayed crossing muddy French farmland. Extremely rare, these survive today as highly prized collector items. Then, 1973 brought a massive geopolitical shock that altered global markets. The oil crisis crippled Western industries. As OPEC slashed production, fuel prices surged overnight, making massive 8-cylinder American muscle cars, which drank fuel like thirsty camels, look like unsustainable monuments to waste. Dealerships across the Atlantic shuddered, and major manufacturers struggled to survive the shift. And who emerged as the ultimate strategic beneficiary of this devastating global economic shockwave? The humble 2CV, sipping just 3 liters per 100 kilometers. Sales spiked dramatically once again, securing an unexpected second lease on life. This strange cultural resurgence culminated in 1981 with a highly memorable cinematic appearance. Cast in the James Bond thriller For Your Eyes Only, the vehicle starred in one of cinema's most famous chase sequences. A bright yellow hatchback, driven by the female lead, desperately outmaneuvers heavily armed assassins driving much more powerful Peugeot sedans. Rammed rolled onto its side, and shedding body panels at every corner, the car keeps moving. It escapes purely through superior agility and lightweight, flexible engineering. While highly choreographed, the stunt sequence highlighted a fundamental truth. Strip away the doors, hood, and fenders, and the vehicle would stubbornly keep moving forward regardless. This mirrored the famous French comedy trope where a runaway nun drives the car to pieces, yet always reaches her destination. Capitalizing on this highly resilient cultural image, Citroën made a brilliant strategic decision that extended the car's production life by nearly a decade. In 1980, they launched the Charleston, a retro two-tone special edition, reframing a rustic utilitarian farm vehicle into a chic urban fashion statement. Though planned as a strict limited run, unprecedented market demand forced its permanent inclusion in the lineup, ultimately sustaining the aging platform through its final years of production. By the late 80s, the regulatory environment shifted dramatically as the European community enacted strict new emission laws. Mandating catalytic converters on all new vehicles spelled an absolute death sentence for the outdated French design. Retrofitting the small air-cooled engine would destroy the car's simplicity, dramatically increasing production costs and mechanical weight and complexity. The company's legendary public relations director Jacques Wolgensinger critically observed the dilemma. If we study his career defending this humble machine, we see him summarizing its ultimate strategic crisis with an immortal remark. "Young man, The 2CV is built to bypass obstacles, not crash into them. But this regulatory barrier was simply insurmountable. On February 26, 1988, the historic assembly line at Levallois-Perret, which had birthed the iconic vehicle 40 years prior, ground to a final, permanent halt. But the story did not end there, as the Portuguese Mangualde plant kept production alive for 2 more years. On July 27, 1990, at exactly 4 p.m., the final Deux Chevaux rolled off the assembly line. It was a gray Charleston, and factory workers stood shoulder to shoulder along the line to salute it, while a brass band played in its honor. 42 years of continuous manufacturing came to an end with a funeral that felt more like a celebration, because this tiny car had brought so much joy to so many that mourning it would have felt like an insult to its legacy. The official tally was 3,868,634 saloons. But when factoring in all utility vans, Ami Diane, Mahari, and Acadian variants, the total easily surpassed 9 million units. 9 million vehicles built on a platform originally designed to carry eggs across plowed fields. But what became of the masterminds behind this legacy? Flaminio Bertoni, the sculptor from Varese, who styled the Deux Chevaux and designed the divine Citroën DS, hailed by critics as the most beautiful car ever built, died suddenly of a heart attack on February 7, 1964, at 61. He was found in his studio, preliminary sketches for a DS-based coupe still scattered across his desk. He never lived to see his humblest creation become a global phenomenon, nor did he witness the Deux Chevaux outlive its creator by more than a quarter of a century. In 2007, Varese dedicated a museum to him, now hosted at the Vollandia Park and Flight Museum, where anyone can admire the plaster models of a visionary who treated automobiles as pure sculpture. Meanwhile, Walter Becchia, the Piedmontese engineer who built the Deux Chevaux' mechanical heart from motorcycle scraps, enjoyed an exceptionally long career. He continued to design Citroën engines for decades, including a 3-liter V6 that never reached production, before finally retiring in 1968 at 76. Yet his brilliant flat-twin engine kept running for another 22 years after he left, powering not just the Deux Chevaux and its offshoots, but even motorized hang gliders and Ponson's 6-wheel military vehicles. The industrial impact of this vehicle was immediate and profound. Renault, lacking any viable alternative in their portfolio, counterattacked in 1961 with the Renault 4, heavily mimicking Citroën's philosophy, but wrapped in a more modern, conventional body. Fiat, meanwhile, was forced to radically overhaul its market strategy in the budget compact segment, because their 500 cost twice as much as the little French icon, yet lacked a 4-speed gearbox, magic carpet suspension, or a full-length sunroof. How could an industrial titan like Fiat accept such complete humiliation by a car weighing just 550 kilograms, powered by an engine smaller than many motorcycles? And the history may not be finished yet. With Renault successfully resurrecting their classic 5 and 4 models as electric vehicles, you and I are hearing whispers of a potential return of the Deux Chevaux as a small urban electric vehicle positioned between the minimalist Ami and C3. 2028 will mark 80 years since its debut, and market observers speculate Citroën might target that exact milestone for the launch. Thierry Cascas, head of the brand, has publicly dismissed these reports, insisting that strategic focus must look forward, not backward. Yet the commercial power of a cultural icon is hard to suppress, and 42 years of history prove one thing: expert market analysis means absolutely nothing when consumers truly connect with a product. If you found this investigation valuable, drop a like to support our research. Let's discuss in the comments, what is your personal history or memory of the Deux Chevaux? Have you driven one or spotted it on your local streets? To track our upcoming case studies on iconic vehicles that transformed global markets, subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated whenever we publish a new strategic historical breakdown. See you next time.